some quick concepts that have been put out about dimensions that I believe have a majority of people misled, and they don't really understand what it is because of the way that we've been taught to think about things. One of the misconceptions that I'm going to identify today is that so a lot of times we get told that we're in this third dimension, this concept of the third dimension, because we understand blocks. You know, they show us things like a block, right? And they're like, oh, this is what the third dimension is. It's a little box thing here, and they give us that concept, and they say, now we're in the third dimension, and they say, how do you know? Because everything, they give you the concept of what you can see, right? If I draw a tree here, they say, sorry, I know this drawing is butched right now, but okay, hopefully you can all see that. If I draw a tree here, this is obviously the tree's shadow, right? They say, oh, the only way you know that's a shadow is because of depth perception, whereas everything that you see is not really three-dimensional. You're just interpreting it based upon the shadows and stuff. So I can draw a picture and make you think that it's three-dimensional, but it's actually two-dimensional, right? They try to trick you like that and say, you don't really know that you're in the third dimension or not. You're just looking at a two-dimensional picture and interpreting it, and your brain naturally puts it together that it's three-dimensional, right? Okay, but the trick of the matter that I'm going to show you is there's two types of ways we can see, okay? It's this way that we see, okay? All right, and then it's this way that we see. Okay, how many people have ever seen this symbol? I don't know if you can see this symbol. All right, okay. So this is a ancient Egyptian symbol called the Eye of Horus, okay? And I'll be telling you a little bit about the ancient ideology behind this concept, right? And pretty much to cut it short, just to summarize it for you, the trick is to get you to believe that seeing is believing, but we all know that seeing is not believing, because a lot of times our eyes play tricks on us. What's actually believing is this concept is actually, it lines up, and I'll do another class on this later, but it lines up with your brain being sliced in half. And it actually, each piece of this is a piece right here, this is a piece right here, each piece of this corresponds to a sense, one of your senses. So it tells you how you actually see with what is known as the third eye, which is the eye in the brain, which is, this one is, it's probably like smell. This one is thought right here, because they say like the eyebrows show the expression of thought. When you're happy, your eyebrows get excited, when you're mad, you know. And each one of these senses corresponds, touch, taste, smell, sight, and hearing, thought. So they had 6 senses, right? Each one of these senses corresponds to a fraction in ancient Egypt, and they actually have weight. So I'll touch on that a little bit more later. But today we're going to be talking about how if you see with your mind, it's different from how you just see with your eye, because your eye is just one of 5 other senses, and it's not even the most important one. Later I'll tell you guys what the actual most important sense is that we actually use, okay? So that's one of the tricks and the misconceptions, is that, you know, they tell you to look with your eye and you don't really know what's going on, but you can clearly feel something and say, wait a minute, with my eyes of my hands, this is three-dimensional. I'm not getting tricked about that. I can hug this, wrap around it, right? My eyes and my nose, I can smell is something different, you know? So that's one thing. Another trick is, this is what I'm gonna wrap it around to, is if everything exists in, well, let's draw it like this. And I wanted to, I have to flip it, right? So, yeah. Okay, here we have 2 right triangles, right? If I wanted this triangle, this right triangle, to match this right triangle, and I tried to flip it, right? Flip it 90 degrees, it would turn into this. And we can see that that doesn't match, right? Flip it another 90 degrees, it would turn into this. So we're gonna flip it, we're gonna flip it again, it would turn into this. And we can clearly see that that doesn't match, right? That triangle does not match that triangle, right? We flip it another 90 degrees and turn into the opposite of that, which would be this. I'm gonna draw it over here just for the sake of the video. Flip it another 90 degrees, it would turn into this. Obviously doesn't match, right? And then we flip it another 90 degrees, it would turn back into what it was in the beginning, right? So we can see each time we flip this thing on this two-dimensional surface, there's no orientation of whether, if we flip it 360 degrees to get this to match this triangle, right? You can't flip it to make it match, because you'd have to take this triangle, take it out of the page, flip it over like a book, then it would match, right? So this is the concept of two-dimensional space being stuck in a two-dimensional space and not being able to align with what you're trying to align with. And we're going to talk about how can we break into that third dimension to actually get the alignment that we're looking for. Does that make sense? Okay. But we won't be able to break out of the space unless we actually access the third dimension and flip it over. But we all know triangles don't just flip randomly. Triangles have no arms, no legs, no eyes, you know. So that's important to understand that we're also talking about reality here. You don't want to make too many outlandish ideas, because that's where the tricks come in. Always focus on reality, right? So we're going to be talking about how can we come out of one dimension, go into another one in order to get the transformation in a lower dimension that we're looking for, right? Remember, this is all about mind mastery, okay? How we're going to master our minds, right? Okay, so these are just some of the quick misconceptions that people have about dimensions and stuff and the way that we think about it, right? Okay, so now that we've kind of talked about what spirituality is, let's talk about what a dimension actually is, right? Let's throwing that word around. A dimension is anything used to, it's a set of directions used to describe a position somewhere in space, right? And that's the way I describe it, okay? So, for instance, I'm going to go into depth, but just as a quick overall view to kind of orient your minds. A point has no dimensions, right? A dot has no dimensions. You don't need to describe this thing anywhere in space or anything, right? You say, what do you mean by that? Okay, boom. The next dimension, this is 0 dimension. The next dimension will be a line, right? A line is described in 1 dimension, as in length. You put 0 here. What is that line? This is a line of 1. This is a line of 2. You know, it's on the 0 axis. A page, a plane, is described in 2 dimensions, length and width. Now, as we keep adding dimensions, what I'm going to show you, length and width becomes 0. Then you get 1, 2, 3. You're adding dimensions at right angles. When you get to a 90-degree angle, you get another dimension, right? Okay. But as you can describe something else in another way to add to describe its locality in this thing that we call space, this location, that is how we get dimensions. As in, where is this pin right now? Well, it's 5 meters to the left right here, 3 meters from that wall. It's off the ground this amount of meters. It's inside the door this amount of meter. It's this far from outside, okay? Third dimension is going to be in and out, but that's what we're talking about when we talk about dimensions. Ways to describe where we are in space and in time, this concept of what we have time. These are going to be ways to describe where we are in space and time. And this is important because this will also give you the clue to how you can use these higher dimensions to actually navigate your space and time. Because we know, like, if we're stuck in the woods, it's important for us to figure out where we're going to understand where we are in space. But if we're lost in our lives, how do we figure out where do we go in our space and time, right? Okay, so let's get into the heavy math portion, right? I'm gonna leave these two up. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is, draw it like this. This is 0D. I just drew the 0 dimension, okay? Try to go through it quick. In the 0 dimension, you would be what's known as, this is the dimension here. The 0 dimension, and when we're talking about a dimension, we're talking about the totality of the universe, not just one little thing. We're talking about, this is what the universe is. So in the 0 dimension, it would exist in just a point. You can't really describe it anywhere. It just floats around and doesn't do anything. What you would see with your eyes is a complete black screen. You wouldn't see anything. Just imagine being stuck out in space. You can't feel anything. You don't really know you got a body. You can't open your eyes. You're just floating in darkness. You don't know if you're touching something. So you kind of feel one with everything else because you never knew anything to be separate from yourself. You're just in complete darkness. This is the 0 dimension. And also in dimensions, we're talking about, what we're going to start to understand is that we're talking less about structures and we're talking more about consciousness. This is how consciousness comes into being, right? So complete darkness. Like before you was a baby, you don't know where you just came from. You just popped up somewhere. Like I was just nowhere at first. And then I just thought, and I had my first thought running around my grandma, or what was I before that? I was just nothing, and just straight darkness, right? That's what you would see with your eyes. What you experience with your brain will be nothing. Like this is dark. It's unconsciousness, right? That's the 0D. I'll draw as many as I can until we run out of space here. Okay, the first dimension, that dimension, each dimension is when the consciousness learns that it can move, right? So when this consciousness learns that it can move, you get one dimension, which is 2 balls here. One dimension, when one point, because we all know that a line, the most basic definition of a line is 2 points, right? You got to have 2 points to make a line. One point is one. So the next dimension, the most basic dimension, is as soon as that inches one little, whatever little small increment you want to put there, and you're into the second dimension, which is 2 balls here, right? And this would be a line. This dimension is called length, right? In this line dimension, you would exist as a ball. You would exist. What you would see, you would be able to perceive the ball, right? But what you could tell with your brain, what you would be encroaching upon, is the understanding slightly that there may be a tube dimension. Just imagine a spitball. That is the length dimension, right? So now we exited the dot and we realized, like, oh, there's more dots out here, so it's 2 dots. Line, right? This is the 1D length. Then I'm just going to go through these quick. Then you get width in the 2D. Length and width, it becomes, this is a dot in the back, a dot right here, and a dot right here. So I'm going to draw these 3. And there's a dot in the back. So imagine like a triangle, right? Okay, well, let me go back to the first dimension. Why would you only see a dot right here? Because if you're a spitball in the straw, the most that you can see is what's in front of you. You can't go around it, you're stuck. And if there's another spitball, all you see is blackness. That's what you know for your whole universe, just a black dot in front of you. If you're the last line in the straw, then you see just a white light at the end of the tunnel. And throughout your whole life, you're just wondering, what is that thing in front of me? I can't move. I can't physically move in this universe. All I can do, because I'm confined by the confines of the universe, is just imagine, what is this black dot in front of me? Or what is this little white thing? And sometimes we know dimensions are not stagnant. If somebody wagged that straw sometimes the white dot may go away and it may come back, but you can only see what's right in front of you. So you're just trying to figure out what life is. And you might have an inference, like if you were an intelligent dot, I think I may be in a straw. But because I'm confined by the straw, I can't see outside of the universe. It's physically impossible to see outside to tell that I'm in a straw, unless somebody pulls me outside of that universe and I'm able to look down and say, oh snap, I'm in a straw. And we will find that this happens sometimes to humans. They get pulled outside of the universe and look down at it. But, okay, boom. The second one is width. So imagine you get 3 magnetic balls and you put them together and it forms a triangle. That's the simplest form of a page, right? The most that you can see in a length width dimension, because we just add, we keep the ones below, is a line, right? And you would exist in what's known as a plane. So what do I mean that the most you can see is a line, right? If we exist in a paper dimension, right? We have a piece of paper. We all exist in this paper. If I were to put my finger through the paper, we wouldn't be able to see my complete finger going down. We would just see the tip of the finger first, and then we would see that line get a little wider as it passes through the paper. Then it will stay constant once it reaches the side of the paper and then eventually go away. Is that making sense? A little bit, man. All right, so imagine you're looking through a slit and you can't see anything but inside the slit. That is what the dimension is. You wouldn't be able to tell what the 3-dimensional things are when they passing through. You just see something start to pass through, stops, and it goes away because you only see through the slit. That's all you can view. So you're only viewing a line of what is a larger body. Like you can't, so this is what you're seeing. But with your brain's eye, not just your eyeball, you will be able to infer certain things like, okay, like I'm trying to be this triangle that moves around a certain place, but I can't get outside of this, but I'm watching this line grow and get smaller and then exit my universe. I have a theory that there may be something else, right? There may be something that doesn't really behave like this, okay? Don't want to just bog you down, but that's what you would exist as here. So this is like 3 balls together, right? And that's like 3 people come together, you're like, okay, now we can form a little plane here, right? So now length, width, and now we're going to add this dimension of height. Now, just be mindful, a lot of times when we describe these dimensions, they cube them. They make them cubes, and they make them straight structures. So instead of giving the ball, they would give a point. Instead of giving the 2 dots, they would show you a line. Instead of giving the 3 dots, the magnets, they would give you a plane, like what I drew out here, right? And now when we add height in 3rd dimension, we get a ball on top of these 3 balls, right? Consciousness of a different dimension where we understand that after we have mastered the dimensions of just simply being, and we master the dimensions of striving forward, length, then we master the dimensions of width. Now we have some sort of support system that would allow us to produce what is known as height, right? A lot of times when we draw this out, they draw it out like a cube. Okay. Cubed it. That's an ugly cube. That's terrible cube. Like, I'm kind of I can do better. Let me draw it the way that we used to draw it back in school. You draw one square and you draw another square and you just connect them. Okay, bye. Right? That's how they would show you it, right? But imagine just the 3 triangular dots, and then now you can set a 3rd ball on top of that ball, and you kind of start to understand that something's going up here, right? Now within the cube dimension, this is where the trick comes in. We would only be able to see a plane. Because as something passes through our dimension, the cube dimension is like a TV. Everything on that TV is flat. Though it may look like it's, when we look at the shadows, everything is flat. Here, as we're looking, we can only see 1 dimension lower. So in the 2-dimensional realm, you can only see the dot, right? But the dot was a 0 dimension, remember? In the width realm, in the paper realm, you can only see a line, but the line is literally the 1D dimension, right? In the third dimension, on the TV screen, you can only see a flat surface, but the flat surface is the plane dimension, 2D, right? So I'm also going to be, I'm going to tell it back before I start talking about the fourth and fifth dimension, because I don't know if everybody's familiar with those. So I'm going to start talking about what these dimensions actually are, right? So all the way up into the third dimension, right now, we don't have a concept of time. Time doesn't come into play until the fourth dimension. So these are all things that are not concerned with time, literally mathematically. So mathematically, to describe, because remember what a dimension is, it's describing where something is in a space, right? So mathematically, what we would call this, the length dimension is what's known as an x, right? The width dimension would be a y, and then the height dimension would be a z. Have we all been to math class? Have we ever heard of these things? So on the line, it would look like this. You get these little things, then you get these little things, right? And this is this 1-2 dimension. Now the z-axis exists perpendicular to these, right? So this would be x, this would be y, this would be z, right? And using these, we can describe where the point is relative to, what numbers we give it, right? So that is the 1, 2, 3 dimension. But unfortunately, these things don't have time compared to them. So what I'm proposing is that in the third dimensional object, because it's confined by its universe, as in it can never know that it's in the third dimension. It would never be able to know it. There's no way to actually know it because the whole universe is this dimension. Would be something like this. Because if I set this here with no brain, with no intelligence, the only thing that this block would ever know is the surface that I set it on, which is a 2-dimensional flat surface. And there's no way it can move, there's no way it can ever leave its third dimensional body to ever tell there's anything else unless something outside of its universe comes and grabs it and moves it. And it may speculate, because it doesn't have eyes to see, doesn't have consciousness to know. It may speculate that, when I get lifted over here and I'm experiencing this plane now, I might be in a realm larger than what I think I'm in. But these inanimate objects, because time does not exist for inanimate objects, will never be able to know anything outside of what it is immediately connected to. Does that kind of make sense? So these are the real third dimensional objects. Things without souls, things without life, right? So that's the trick. They want you to get you to believe that you don't have a soul, you don't have a life. All you can know is just the 2 dimension in front of you. But we have bodies and other senses to tell us, like, no, I can literally go move myself and tell this has 3 dimensions. So I'm obviously not in that dimension because I'm outside of it, I can see it. You know what I'm saying? So that is the third dimension. So